Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. Scott Luton and Kim Warder here with you on Supply Chain. Now, welcome to today's live stream. Kim, how you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful. Excited for the long weekend.
We are too. We are too. And we got to get all of our work done so we can enjoy the long weekend. How's that sound?
Yes, absolutely. So let's
So
get this podcast done.
we got a long list of good stuff here, starting with this really unique show here today. I think it's going to be really informative and intriguing as we dialed in on a topic that we don't talk enough about, and that's the air freight industry, at least here at Supply Chain Now. Now, my hunch is that plenty of folks out there in our global audience stand to learn more about this intriguing component of global supply chain too. Things such as, hey, what's the current state of air freight? What's changed since the pandemic? What does peak look like this year, and how should we prepare? And in general, what are some been there, done that expert tips on how to best optimize your organization's approach to using air freight? Stay tuned for a great show with a wonderful guest, including Kim. Your background and expertise is going to be really relevant and helpful here as well. Should be a great show, huh?
Excellent. Super looking forward to it.
I am super looking forward to it as well. And folks, two quick reminders before we get started here today. First off, much like Edgar here. Hello, Edgar. Let us know where you're tuned in from Mexico there. Wonderful. Great to see you, Edgar and Yoel, and of course, Amanda and Catherine behind the scenes. We want to hear from you. Tell us what you think. Share your comments throughout this live discussion, number one. And then secondly, if you enjoyed today's show, be sure to share it with a friend or your network. They'll be glad that you did. All right, so let's get to work. Kim, let's welcome in our featured guest here today, Sean Francisco, Chief Operating Officer for the Americas with Apex Logistics International. Hey, Sean, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Scott.
Great to see you. Have really enjoyed our conversations. Kim, I tell you, Sean is bringing it here today in an expedited manner. Folks need to stop what they're doing and check it out, right?
Yeah, air freight is, if you are not shipping air freight and working in the e-commerce industry, you're probably losing out on some opportunities. So this is going to be a great conversation.
I agree. Well said there, Kim. And also want to just welcome in a few other folks. Sean Mayer from Chicago. I hope I'm saying that right. Let me know if I'm not. Great to have you here. Deborah from Pittsburgh. Kevin from Bentonville, Arkansas. Great to see all of y'all, and let us know what you think as we work our way through. But here's where we're going to start. Before we get to all the good stuff, we're going to start with a fun warm-up question, Sean and Kim. All three of us and millions of others out there have been really captivated with the Summer Olympics in Paris that wrapped up a few weeks ago, right? I think a lot of folks, as I was sharing pre-show, have come and told me, hey, the Olympics are reinvigorated, and we're all just can't wait until LA in 2028. So with all of that said, Sean, I know you're a big fan of the Olympics. What was one of your favorite moments from Paris?
That's really not an easy question to answer, Scott, because for 2 weeks, the world brings together the best athletes. And, whether it's gymnastics or swimming or track and field, there are stories within a story. But probably if I had to choose one event, I was really engaged and proud of how the U.S. did in the men's and women's basketball.
Yes.
To be able to continue its long history of winning the gold wasn't easy, but they put on a fantastic show. It was great.
They sure did. And their ceremonies for all the medal winners at the end of both of those tournaments, men's and women's, that was just heartwarming. And so thank you for taking one of mine. Kim, what was one of your favorite experiences from the Olympics?
Gymnastics. I grew up as a little gymnast, not very good at gymnastics, but was shuttled off the gymnastics classes on a weekly basis for years. And so I've always loved watching that as a little girl. I loved watching gymnastics. So it was wonderful to see the U.S. team just slam it.
Man, so no wonder you're such a supply chain pro. You are trained in the art of gymnastics and flexibility, all that good stuff. Love it. Well, we got a lot of folks tuned in, and let me just add mine really quick. I'd love to hear y'all, everyone out there. Zion, LK's with us. Cedric, great to see you. Sam, Alicia, Jim, Pamela. Let us know some of your favorite moments from the Olympics. I would just add, The U.S. women's 4x400 relay, that was like just inspirational. And one other thing that wasn't as widely, I don't think it's as widely known, is there was a French Paralympian that wore a exoskeleton, and it was the first time that a Paralympian had run with the torch in the lead up to the first day, and that was inspiring. So lots of good stuff from the Olympics for sure. All right, so Sean and Kim, we got to get to work. There's so much else we could talk about the Olympics, which, by the way, is a huge supply chain feat, but I'll save that for another show. I want to start here, Sean. You have got, you're a very humble person, is what I've gathered from our previous conversations, but you've got an incredible journey, done a lot of things across industry. So let's start there. If you would tell us briefly about your background, Sean.
Sure. So first, I've been very fortunate to be in the logistics industry for over 30 years. And if I'm being honest, when I left college, I didn't know much about supply chain or logistics, but I was able to get into this industry. And then I realized what a long history our industry has had. And over that period of time, I worked in almost every aspect of logistics, from messenger to operations, processing documents, lived in different cities. I was able to secure my customs brokerage license, work through the IATA, FIATA training programs, where, later on in my career, I was able to kind of settle in and focus on transportation and air cargo. And that's also been an incredible journey as well.
Yeah, man. And that's just the what's those books that used to publish back in the day that just gave you the highlights of all the English reads we had to make? What was that, Kim?
Cliff Notes.
Cliff Notes. That was a Cliff Notes version of Sean's journey. And Kim, pulling just one thing out of that, what Sean shared, I could relate because I didn't learn anything about supply chain logistics in college or certainly high school. My introduction probably was loading containers into Air Force planes, but way back in the day. But Kim, here there that really resonated with you.
It's interesting because I didn't go to college for supply chain either. I kind of fell into it. I graduated with a degree in international relations at a Bachelor of Arts degree. And a friend of the family knew a friend of the family. And Kim needed a job because she graduated from college. And I started out as a telex girl. This is before we had cell phones. And we had to send telexes to the ships. And I started as a telex operator. I was a terrible typist then. I'm a terrible typist now. It never got better. But yeah, that was my job. And printing off all the telexes and making copies and giving them to all the people. You remember that?
Been there, done that for sure.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna have a reminiscing show. We'll have to set up a sequel here. Really quick before we move on and make sure Sean tells us what Apex does in a nutshell. Hey, T Squared, great to have you here. It is time for some supply chain management, IATA nourishment. We are bringing it on just for you, my friend. Mike says breakdancing from the Olympics was certainly a highlight. That was a new twist.
I wasn't going to go there. I was going to bring it up, but I said no.
Oh, I'll tell you what, it was something. Nice. And then Luciana, great to see you here via LinkedIn from Brazil. Let us know what you think from the conversations that we're having. All right, so Kim and Sean, thank you both for sharing a little bit about your background, beginning, and then some. Sean, tell us, a lot of folks are familiar with Apex, but just in a nutshell for context especially, tell us what the company does.
Sure. So Apex is a leading global provider of essential supply chain solutions. We're founded in 2001, and over the next 20 years have accelerated to becoming a top 5 global air freight forwarder, ranked number 1 in China and over the Trans-Pacific. Our focus has always been on each individual customer. Our motto is we deliver passion. And I'd like to describe Apex as an open source provider. And what I mean by that is when we look at the logistics chain in support of supply chains, there are many steps in a process. We look at each step and identify how can we improve upon that step to ensure that our customers have the best possible service. There are many times when we will work with another company to improve on that step. And then there are many situations where we simply will invest and take over that step. Open source means collaborating and working to find the best solution for our customers, and not in a isolated manner where our customers won't always get the best service.
Sean, I love that. First off, the rankings are just in time for college football season, so I love that. And congrats on y'all's movement up the rankings and at the top in some cases. And Kim, that last comment he made about no matter what it is, the customer is always the North Star, and that's where the perspective as they assemble solutions, that resonates with me. Your thoughts there, Kim?
Of course, it resonates with me because that's the Amazon model. But I would say any successful service provider, if you start with the customer and work backwards, you're going to have a much better solution. I think the other thing that Sean pointed to that is really key is understanding every single step in the process and how to optimize that individual step, because that will lead to a better supply chain overall. And I think that was a really great point that Sean brought up.
Excellent. Breaking it down, and excelling in each little ingredient. Well said there, Sean and Kim. By the way, Awab, great to see you back with us. It is a great, interesting supply chain topic, I think, that doesn't get enough attention in forums like this. And welcome in from Egypt. So keep the comments coming, everybody. Okay, let's see here. Oh, by the way, sorry, one more shout out. Maria, great to have you back with us. From Spain. Looking forward to your comments here on the air freight industry. All right, so we got a great topic here today. I really love how we've couched this thing, Sean and Kim. Air freight roulette, how to win. So, folks, not to tell too much on myself, but I love playing roulette. I might be a sucker. I don't know. It's just easy and it's fun. And sometimes when luck breaks in your favor, I tell you, it can be a lot of fun. So with that as an ongoing analogy, the gift that keeps on giving, let's set the table a little bit, right? So, Sean, if you would, elaborate a bit on the current status of the air cargo industry.
Sure. I smiled when you said air freight roulette, because it seems that our industry has moved into a phase where there are situations where it may be a gamble in regards to what you're trying to achieve. So that's why I kind of smiled, right? And I'm not a gambling person, but I think everyone's kind of familiar with roulette. And if you think of roulette, your odds is based off of your decision. It can be very precise. I think you can select a specific number. Some have many favorite numbers, but your odds are less in that white ball popping on that number.
Right.
The simplest and safest bet is selecting a color. Usually it's red or black. It's a 50-50 odd. And so when I think about the state of air freight today, it is really a guessing game. There are a lot of dynamics. I won't simplify the decisions that go into selecting an air freight service or even booking an air freight shipment. But what I do know is that processes and decisions have not really evolved with the new dynamics. And so what I'm referring to is, in the global pandemic, what everyone saw was that we all got more comfortable with online shipping.
Yep.
Or shopping, I should say. We got all more comfortable on having meetings similar to this, live stream or through video conferencing. The e-commerce industry rose and took advantage of individuals getting comfortable with online shopping and simply have ran with it and have influenced how air freight services are being purchased and provided in today's environment. So your title, I smiled because, you can associate with a lot of decisions as a 50-50 proposition of will it work or will it not work? Will you win or will you not win?
A calculated risk, an educated guess in some cases. Not all days are like others. Kim, respond to kind of the opening salvo there from Sean. What did you hear there that really stands out?
So picking your partner is key, right? And I think Sean has a lot of expertise he's going to share with us about that. But not all cargo is the same. And it's not always just about the price and whether or not you bought 1 day versus, cargo 3-4 day. And the other thing that's very interesting, I think, in the air cargo space, and Sean's going to share some stuff with us about this as well, is that just how it's evolved. Especially as we think about it, air cargo, when I started in the supply chain industry, was pretty much for very expensive products or very time sensitive products, right? It was very expensive. Not a lot of people were doing air cargo on a regular basis. But as we've moved into direct to consumer and shipping directly from origin to the customer, we're seeing all kinds of different kinds of our air cargo solutions, right? With consolidation and direct injection into the postal networks and things like that. So air cargo really has changed.
Kim, what a wonderful, perfect segue for this next question to Sean, because a lot of things have changed, not just in air freight and air cargo, but what other part of the world hasn't changed since the pandemic came along, right? So to that end, Sean, what dynamics within the air freight industry have changed maybe the most post-pandemic?
Yeah, so most businesses have looked forward to and therefore have estimated that coming out of the global pandemic, that things would return to norm. However, I think no one really saw the emergence of e-commerce because of the boom of online shopping. So if you think about pre-pandemic, that was up to the ending of 2019 because the global pandemic was declared in March of 2020.
Right.
At that time, e-commerce was operating, but not to the levels we've seen. The global pandemic did a couple things, and one was elevate the importance of e-commerce.
Yeah.
But also it elevated the importance of supply chain. Everyone knew who Amazon was, but people kind of really realized of the ability to get their product from a factory in, say, Asia to a doorstep in, say, Atlanta within 3 days. And so that has created sort of the new phenomenon, which really is the influence of e-commerce post-pandemic, and how they have changed the air freight industry. Because for a company, in this case, the e-commerce vertical, to be able to service their customers, and their ambition is every doorstep in the world, 3 days from factory to door, they need to position themselves with dedicated consistency in access to air freight capacity and services. And so when we looked at the ending of 2023, when they emerged after the global pandemic, China alone, they purchased nearly 50% of all air freight capacity operating in China. That's 6 billion kilos, Scott, 50%. So what we also learned was that wasn't enough, but that's all they had access to. So as we stepped into 2024, they moved early. They bought early and they bought big, and they secured not only more than 50% of the market air freight capacity, but then they expanded beyond North Asia, expanded more than just servicing China. And our rough estimates bring that they have secured over 65% of the market capacity at the start of 2024. So coming out of the pandemic, it's made it even more difficult for the industry, for many businesses to have an air freight strategy or plan, because the amount of available capacity has minimized a lot.
All right. So I hate to use the word table stakes, but you've established a lot of those here. I'm going to keep beating up this analogy a good bit. But folks, stay tuned, because based on all those market conditions Sean just walked us through, we're going to touch on and ensure you know how to take a smarter approach so you can win more and not just take my strategy of betting on red 19 each and every time. So, Kim, those are
What's your favorite number, Scott?
What's that, Sean?
Now we know your favorite number.
That is, there we go. That's my,
Isn't that Matt McConkey's favorite number, the wide receiver from Georgia?
It might be, but it's my secret, very highly complex and scientific strategy. So take it at your own risk. Kim, those are some really big shifts. I didn't have a chance to do the conversion of 6 billion kilos to pounds, but let's just say that's a big number. Your thoughts there, Kim, before we move on.
It's it's hard to have a strategy when the deck is kind of stacked against you almost every year. And in order to do that, because of what's happening with the market, with capacity being restricted almost artificially, you have to be aware of what's going on. You have to engage with the right partners. You have to have your relationships in place. It's not just about booking cargo anymore, especially with what's happening in the market. It's really about working with the right people.
Well said, Kim. I love that. And Sean, I know that resonates with you because you've got a passion for people and relationships. That's one of the things I've learned in our due diligence prior to today. But folks, hey, let us know what your take. We're about to get into 3 things you got to keep front and center as Sean walks us through that. But let us know your observations when it comes to the air cargo market, and maybe even anything you and your organization have learned. All right, so Sean, for our fearless audience members out there, because we got the smartest audience in all of global supply chain right here at Supply Chain Now. So folks out there that are either using air cargo a lot, they're seasoned pros, they've wrangled it, they've conquered the rodeo that presents itself each year, or they're newer and they've used it a little bit here and there, and they've got a lot to learn. There are all points in between. I think we're going to walk through 3 things that they should focus on. What's the first one, Sean?
Yeah. So before I answer that, Scott, I just want to say, with your call out of the audience, it is, I'm based here in the U.S., but they're all over the world. So I do apologize up front if I don't cover a particular area, but I recognize your audience is it's global. So the first thing is for the audience is as you're going through your procurement process. I think the one thing you would like to do, especially what I just described of the state of the air cargo market, is try to work with a service provider or a few service providers that have a strong commitment in the industry. And I can't really speak for everyone, but I'll use Apex Logistics as an example. Recognizing the emergence of e-commerce in 2022 and their growth in 2023, as well as their ambition moving forward, Apex continues to invest for its clients within the logistics industry. An example to that is today, as we are about to step into September, Apex operates over 60 freighter flights per week across the Trans-Pacific. The Trans-Pacific represents over 35% of all air freight moved around the world. So it is a big market. The US, North America, the Americas, they're a large consuming, importing market, and Asia is the world's largest factories right now. And so 60 flights a week, you just kind of think about that, that's over 3,000 dedicated freighter flights. It is to continue to add capacity because the market has got constrained. If you kind of look at the amount of capacity and the commercial airlines that services the Trans-Pacific market, the Apex dedicated charter fleet would represent probably a top 5 airline that's operating over Trans-Pacific. And our ambition is to continue to grow that, because it looks like many of our customers are not slowing down. They will continue to grow. And so that customer base ranges from e-commerce to high tech to retail. It seems that growth started during the pandemic when we were
Right.
helping the government with PPEs. And that kind of expanded forward to where we are today.
And
So
Sean, with that growth comes change, right? Plenty of change. And as we were talking pre-show, I think in this first thing that folks got to keep front in mind, the criticality of change management, right? Anything you want to add there before I get Kim's comments?
yeah, so the challenge with change is it's never comfortable. There's always risk involved. But I think when you look at sort of how air freight has evolved, I think companies really have to consider how they're managing within their supply chain the air freight services that they have today. And change may be inevitable to be able to keep up with what's happening around them.
That's right. That
Yeah.
is right. Kim, change management, what growth brings, what complexity brings, what a global business brings, you name it. There's no shortage of sources that are driving change and challenges in our businesses. Your thoughts there?
So, Sean's kind of touching on the fact that if you're in the air cargo space and you're still managing your air cargo the way you did it pre-pandemic, you're not optimizing your air cargo supply chain. You're not taking advantage of other providers out there. You may not be even working with the best providers because there's been so much shift in the market. So in order to have a really good cargo strategy, you have to embrace the fact that you may not be doing it perfectly today.
Well said. And there's so much power in that multimodal diversity and flexibility, all those gymnastics that Kim is so good at. There's so much power there.
Can I just say one thing about the
Please.
gymnastics? I think everything I learned there is I learned to fall down and
get back up. I knew where you're going, Kim.
Yes.
And you know what that is? I'm glad you mentioned that. That is a universal lesson learned, no matter if you're in supply chain, if you're growing up. It's a leadership lesson. We all fall down at various times, but it's being able to pull yourself back up, your team back up, and keep moving forward. Okay, one other thing that I wonder. Oh, I know what I want to do. I want to welcome in Jeremy's back with us. Jeremy from the great state of Wisconsin. I think Jeremy is in the manufacturing industry, one of my favorites. Great to have you back. Let us know your thoughts, Jeremy and Edgar and Mika and many others on what you are seeing out in the air cargo industry. Okay, so that willingness to change, because the market already has, but how is your organization handling it, right? That's a really important thing to keep your finger on the pulse of. What's number two? Because I think number two, Sean, you're going to give us some thoughts on what we should be looking for in a successful partnership with an air freight provider, right?
Yes. So once you select your service provider or providers within your organization, how you can help your strategy be successful is really evolving to where you're able to manage your commitments as well as your booking. So I have an example for this, Scott.
Okay.
We all have had the opportunity to travel as passengers. And so if I'm using me as an example, if I know I'm going to fly out in 30 days, I try to purchase my airline ticket. I try to do it early for a couple of reasons. One is to have the most flexibility in the flights that I want to fly on. I want to try to have the best price, and I always want to try to get the best seat. But if I'm not sure that I'm going to fly out in 30 days, I will wait. And so my decisions will reduce as I get closer to my actual departure time. And so air cargo is the same, right? Once a flight departs, the airlines or the forwarder have no opportunity to resell unused space. So as the time gets closer towards you needing your shipments to fly, those decisions get less and less. And I recognize that one or a business may not be able to determine when their shipment needs to fly, say 30 days from now. But that's where working with your service provider, ensuring that you have upfront capacity commitments. And again, that commitments is more secure when it's on a provider's own asset versus being shared with others on a commercial asset. And then try to keep to that commitment. And you don't have to do 100% of your needs. A lot of our customers will commit 30% to ensure that they have a baseline. They have a consistent flow into that capacity. There is not only consistency, but rhythm to how shipments are being picked up and then loaded and then flown across the world and then cleared and then delivered. So try to get into a cadence so that way the predictability is something that your service provider can manage versus the unknown.
I like that, Kim. I like that. I also like this from Big Show Bob Bo before I get your comment, Kim. He says, never throw out the very good for the perfect, especially when you're already dealing with a million issues in your supply chain every day. Well said there. All right. So, Kim, I love what Sean finished on in terms of the predictability, right? What can we commit to so there's enough predictability for our air freight provider to work with, right? And handle and perfect and improve. Your thoughts there, Kim, what Sean should?
Yeah. So, most importers out there are not going to commit 100% of their air cargo because air cargo is very volatile, right? So you're going to try to purchase as much as you can. But it's always a good idea to do 30 to 50% in a committed contract. That way you at least have half of your supply chain covered, and then you can kind of ride out the rest of it. But I do agree with Sean that you do need to make some commitments to airlines in order to start getting those best services.
Yes. Well said, Kim. Before I move to the third one, Sean, when you think of that selection process to finding the best fit for your organization, you think about the relationships and the processes involved and other dynamics. Anything else come to mind that you would offer up as advice to folks that are trying to figure out, okay, what's the best match here?
Yeah, there has been an evolution within our industry, especially when it comes to international transportation. And as I shared earlier, being in this industry for over 30 years, we've seen the evolution. I've seen the evolution. And companies have become more and more advanced in how they manage their logistics supply chain. And they've divided their process between, say, procurement and operations. The best customers we work with, and when I say best, the best control over their supply chain, they've been able to bring both sides together. Because in the end, you may purchase probably the best deal available, but if your goods are not delivered to your customers, that's going to be a failure. So working together will probably put you in the best position to yield the best results.
Sean, well said. I just about moved to that third point. I'm glad we didn't, because Kim, we talk about silo busting all the time here for years, right? But I think, as I'm doing a quick recollection through all the shows, I don't think we've ever applied silo busting, at least in the conversation I've been a part of, to the selection process, which is kind of what Sean was talking about there.
Yes.
Your thoughts, Kim?
Yeah, the merchant buyers, the planners, supply chain, everybody needs to be working together. I still see out there in the market companies who have that siloed supply chain that just kind of operate over here and they report on like, here's our booking report for the week, but they're not involved in the sourcing conversations and the merchant picking conversations. And it's really important to bring those two things together, especially with air freight, because one, it costs a lot of money, so you can't really afford to screw it up. And two, it moves really fast. So if you do kind of make a mistake, it's going to compound pretty quickly. So the best supply chains I see out there today are really the merchants, and the supply chain teams are working hand in hand. They're helping each other. They're not beating each other over the head every day with their, my report says this, your report says that. So that's a key piece I would take away from this.
Well said, Kim. I love that. And it's like Sean wrapped his response on. Just because you get the best deal, if they can't make it happen, What is it even worth? It don't even matter.
Yep.
All right. Hey, really quick, I want to mention something Jeremy's really proud of. They moved over from, they've recovered supply chains, both in the Asian and European supply streams, to move from air freight to ocean freight in the last month. From air freighting supply for the last 18 months. That's going to keep a few pennies in their pockets. One of his proudest accolades. Great job, Jeremy. These shifting sands is tough to manage. So great job here. All right, Sean, let's see. There's a third thing that we want to make sure folks keep front and center. And that deals with consequences, which my parents told me all about growing up. Consequences. Your thoughts there, Sean?
Yeah. So, there was an interesting thing as well during the global pandemic. Whereas when airlines or passenger aircrafts sort of suspended all of their services, and moving air freight became more difficult. Because Apex operated a lot of its own aircrafts, we recognized that a lot of companies who came to us, who we never worked with before, didn't have any restrictions or restraints of just getting onto our flights and using the capacity we had. And then fast forward, as businesses try to return back to normalcy, their decision-making process also has returned where they've put up restraints. And that restraints could be, lack of resources for a transition, or maybe lack of resources for integration or connectivity within systems. But because of that, maybe they're more reluctant to change. And yes, the current market is not a global pandemic. But as I explained earlier on how the buying of air freight capacity has changed, if companies don't remove certain restrictions and they don't change, they may find themselves back at the roulette table of choosing red or black and trying to make a decision, will it work or will it not? So I think they have to look at being more flexible. And the last thing is, the manufacturing industry is also evolving, right? Whether it's through political decisions, whether it's through conflicts around the world, a lot of manufacturing is migrating to different countries. And that migration is emerging in India, Mexico, Southeast Asia. And so not every provider is equal in every location. And so they have to really think of not only how to prepare themselves for the last part of this year, but really what does 2025 and 26 will look like. The one question we get is, how long do we think the impact of the e-commerce industry will be? And no one really knows, right? But we know that their ambition is to continue to grow. And we see that expansion beyond mature markets such as the US and the EU. They're going to every market that they can. And they're trying to establish themselves as the number one reliable source of receiving your product.
A lot of good stuff there. Kim, I want to go way back to near the beginning of his response, because he made an interesting comment here. Folks, you want to be back at the roulette table for fun in your spare time, your free time. You don't want to be at the roulette table when you're trying to depend on it for business decisions. The odds are not in your favor in that regard. But Kim, I really appreciate kind of how he approached very diplomatically some of the consequences out there. Your thoughts there, Kim?
So, we touched on this a little bit earlier in the conversation, and it is this: if you don't have the inventory, you can't sell it. So choose wisely is always my big piece of advice to people. But I preach that, especially with supply chain, because people don't talk about supply chain, especially in customer experience and retail and e-commerce. Like, we just don't talk about supply chain. But the fact is if I can't get it on a plane or a ship or however a truck and get it to you, it doesn't really matter. And I'm talking about the inventory to the warehouse. I'm talking about the shipment to the customer. And especially as we move more and more into direct shipping from origin, we're going to see more of that. I think the other really interesting thing that Sean touched on is that we are seeing major shifts in manufacturing origins. That's driven by the tariffs that we have in place right now. We're expecting there to be some additional shifts in the U.S. for political reasons here in the future. And so we're seeing more shift to Southeast Asia, more shift to Latin America. Well, not everyone carries cargo out of those places and can do it well. You will see a lot of air cargo carriers chasing that market now. But again, back to what Sean's been talking to us about the whole time, it's about picking the right partner who will honor their commitments.
Well said. Well said. And going to your response, there's been some early winners in these big shifts, right? India is growing their manufacturing base. Vietnam, Mexico's rocking and rolling. That's an excellent call out there because the shifts aren't done.
Mexico imports up 30% into the United States.
All right. So I wish we can we extend this to another extra hour, Sean and Kim? We got a lot to get to. Yoel makes a good comment that I bet Sean agrees with. Clients want more visibility in their air freight as it travels through its logistical process.
They do.
We want visibility everywhere, don't we, Sean?
Yep.
Yeah, that's correct. And, as I said earlier about how we approach our industry and our customers, we've continued to invest to bring visibility internationally from factory to door. So I know we won't get too much into it, but I would agree with that. That is very important today. And it's not just the major legs. It's, let's just say, on your final mile. Just being able to see your product once it arrives, where it's at. And with technology today, with geo mapping and online services and GPS tracking, that's all available today. But it's just getting with the right provider, your provider, to ensure that they have that as part of your transportation service, because it shouldn't be a bolt-on. It should be part of your overall service.
Yep.
Well said. Excel's an approach with Excel spreadsheets, faxes, phones, and emails will only take you so far, only provide a certain amount of visibility. There are so many better options these days, thankfully, as both of y'all were kind of speaking to way back in the beginning where your careers had started. Okay, I hate to ask a dumb question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Sean, is it going to be a peak season this year? What does that look like?
Scott, it's not a dumb question because it's probably the number one question I receive every year.
Okay.
And for the past 30 years, there has been a peak season every year except for one. And the reason for that is I think I should share really what the definition of peak season is. In the past, peak season was, and again, I'm going to use the Trans-Pacific as an example, is when businesses imported more in preparation of the holiday shopping season. And so that's usually Christmas. But that has expanded because now you have such events as Prime Day, Black Monday, Cyber Friday, Black Friday, Cyber Monday. Sorry about that. You can tell who does the shopping in the family. The definition of peak season is the connection between supply and demand. And when demand is higher, then the price for the capacity or the supply gets higher. But here is what has happened every year. And we're talking about air freight, so I'm going to talk about the commercial airlines. They will raise pricing going into the fourth quarter. It's part of their strategy, it's part of their budgeting. They know that air freight ships heavy in Q1 and Q4. Q1, because many companies want to report a first quarter with strong earnings. And to do that, you need inventory, you need product selling. Q4 is to have enough inventory or product for their commercial or showing well in ending the year. So the airlines will purposely raise pricing in the fourth quarter. Here's the question though, will the demand be strong enough to sustain that pricing? If the demand is not strong enough, then the pricing will soften. If demand is strong, then pricing will continue to elevate. So I've seen years where peak season was 4 weeks or 6 weeks because when the pricing rose, the demand wasn't there to sustain it. And so the airlines removed their peak season, but they do so in offering spot market pricing at a lower rate than their market pricing. But here's what people should realize, or at least the audience, I should say, is air freight pricing today is already at an elevated level. So because the year started off with the e-commerce purchasing a lot of capacity, the available capacity came at a higher rate. So starting off at a higher watermark would tell you that the peak season pricing this year will be much stronger than it was last year.
Okay. And when you, just to make sure we're on the same page, when you say stronger, you're not
Higher.
talking about, yeah, that's right. Want to make sure we're on the same page there.
Yeah.
All right. So Kim, he shared a lot there. I think
Mhm.
that's good insights for folks out there. He started with talking about the smearing that goes on out there. I think you and I have talked about that on the buzz before. And then of
Mhm.
course he talked about that Q1, Q4, some of the yearly norms, and then some. What'd you hear there, Kim, that you think folks got to take to the bank?
Yeah, there's always going to be a peak season. It's not always in October or November. It's not always associated with Christmas. We're also seeing more and more spring peaks, people getting ready for outdoor sporting equipment, pools, and that peak comes in January, February. And we've also, the market has been muddied. We've blurred the lines, right? It used to be that we shop for Christmas gifts at Christmas. Now we're
Right.
shopping for Christmas at Labor Day. And it's all year long, and we have all these new sales events, all the different Prime days. It used to just be in October. Now there's one in June or July to get ready for college. Walmart's jumping on this marketplace sale day. So the lines have been blurred on where there is actually even a peak season anymore.
It's interesting. Speaking of that smearing or shopping year round, Summerween became something this year. Where retailers were sticking with, because demand was there, where
Yep.
folks were buying Halloween stuff as
Yep.
early as April,
Yeah.
which blows my mind, Kim and Sean.
Mhm.
But hey, as Sean pointed out, and Kim, as you and I have talked about just on a million times, demand. It is the
Demand.
alpha and omega of global supply chain.
It is.
Well, and also don't forget this year is also a political year. And
Mhm.
so that creates uncertainty.
Mhm.
We've already seen businesses start to import product early because they
Yep.
are anticipating the possibility, as Kim said earlier, that tariffs may rise.
Mhm.
So bringing in inventory early is driving a lot more demand as well.
It is.
Good point. Good point. I think we're all ready to get past the election already here in the States, at least. All right. Kevin and Richard both are asking some great questions. I bet, Sean, that you and the team would welcome a post-show conversation, cup of coffee, to talk shop with anyone out there that may have questions. Is that right, Sean?
That's correct.
Okay, wonderful. Y'all keep that coming. All right. So let's see. I got one more thing. And this has kind of been a theme throughout today's conversation, but I want to spike the football on this one more time, because I think it helps bring this perspective and make it more actionable, right? Raise your hand if you heard this. But we've always done it this way. Of course, that sounds familiar to all of us, right? We've all heard it at various times, maybe numerous times in our career. And while there's been a ton of change in the global business environment that Kim and Sean, both, all of us are talking about, some companies, though, have chosen to stick with the long-held procurement and supply chain strategies or approaches that can, I'll call them, to be nice, old-fashioned, maybe a bit more static than maybe they should be. Sean, though, and I don't want to overgeneralize either, but Sean, if you would speak to what you're seeing out there, including touched on the risk that certainly is inherent to, one of my favorite words, clinging to how we've always done things.
Yeah, so it's it's a tough question, Scott. The success of businesses is usually tied to their ability to service their customers. When I think of the air freight market, not much change has to take place. Like I think as you're describing it, it's not like you have to restructure your whole organization based off of what's happening in air cargo. But what I also think is philosophies or fundamental processes can be tweaked to try to calibrate with the dynamic that we're seeing here today. And so, getting back towards the e-commerce influence, and as I mentioned earlier, when they procured in 2023 over 50% of the air freight capacity in China, and they wanted to expand, that expansion went through the largest commercial airline, cargo airlines in North Asia to South Asia. So again, think of the United States for capacity to South Asia for air freight. There's very little coming direct from South Asia, if any. And the reason for that is many of these countries, take Vietnam, because you mentioned Vietnam, Scott, they don't have direct flights into the US. They service Europe very well, they service Intra-Asia very well, but they don't really have direct flights into the US, so they don't have cargo flights. So most of the air freight cargo out of Southeast Asia, with the exception of Singapore that has cargo airlines or aircrafts, is being serviced by the North and the Middle East carriers. So just think of Emirates, Etihad, Qatar. And so the e-commerce companies, after they secured over 65% of capacity from the North, they then started negotiating with Southeast Asia. So when we talk about doing things the same, there are things that is embedded in organizations so they're successful, but strategies have to evolve, have to change. And, we've seen more and more new customers sort of break away from sort of legacy setups to try to be more open source, if I can use how I describe Apex, so they can take advantage of newer solutions, newer models that comes at not only a greater value, but at a better price than what maybe legacy processes and services is offering.
Well said, Sean. And also, like Bob over in the comments shares a great long comment, kind of echoing what you're sharing. And he finishes with, the tide is turning faster than ever, especially as it relates to moving from legacy to really new, exciting, innovative approaches. So, Kim, a quick comment. What's that, Sean?
I said Bob's correct. Sorry about that.
He always is. I've learned that for 5 years now. Bob, hope you and the family.
No, Bob.
We all do. Kind of like Kim.
Call me Bob.
All right, we'll make that happen. And Kim, also always being right. What was one of your favorite elements of what Sean shared there in terms of the danger of doing things like we've always done them?
Yeah, if I had $1 for every time I've heard, but we've always done it this way, I probably wouldn't be here doing this podcast. Yeah, so if you aren't evolving, you're dying. I mean, that is the end. That's just basic science and physics, and that's how we all, that's how life works. And so it's especially relevant in corporations and in supply chain. How we move cargo today is drastically different than how we moved cargo in the 1950s, in the 1960s, even into the 90s. Our supply chains are massively different than how we moved cargo before, especially with the introduction of e-commerce. And more importantly, the direct-to-consumer piece of this. That has really changed supply chains, and especially has impacted air cargo, because now people don't actually know that there's air cargo. It's not just FedEx, DHL, and UPS. They know that there's actual consolidation points. People are ordering prescriptions from overseas that are being shipped via air cargo now. I personally get my prescription glasses now from China, and they are air cargo to me. They have a lovely little tracker. I can see when it's on the plane and everything. So you have to change. If you are a supply chain professional today, and I don't care if you've been in the industry for 50 years, probably if you're in it for 50 years, you're a little bit, you definitely have to make some moves. Or with 5 months, successful supply chains are constantly evolving, constantly.
Well said, Kim. And it just makes me think, some of your commentary there. Wonder when we're seeing the next Malcolm McLean that really changes the entire game. It's around the corner. Game's already changing, to Sean and Kim and Bob's and many others comments here. All right. As much as I hate to, we got to start to wrap. Let's do this. We got a couple resources from Sean and the team we want to share with folks, including one that if you're a fellow aviation buff, you're going to love. But Sean, how can folks track you down, you and your team on the move, for any conversations, to talk shop, to compare thoughts, maybe even do business with you? How can folks connect with you?
Yeah, so first they can reach out through our website, www.apexglobe.com. And personally, they can reach me on LinkedIn. I'm invested in this industry. I'm enthused about this industry. And whether it's just a simple chat, they can reach me there.
Love that, Sean. And we're going to drop the link, so you're one click away, folks, from connecting with Sean's team. Now, Bob does say, who knows? We had a fourth panelist here. Bob says, by the way, talk to my wife. He's not always right. So you're proving me wrong. All right. Good stuff there. And we're dropping, as I mentioned, apexglobe.com. You're one click away from connecting there. Now, here's some cool stuff. I'm going to share a couple graphics, because if you're an aviation buff like I am, check this out. One of the resources we got from Sean's team is the Apex team is excited to add the last Boeing 747-8 freighter to its operations. And Sean and his team have shared this cool YouTube video that shows the aircraft being manufactured all the way through eventually taking off. So y'all got to check it out. We're dropping a link there in the chat. It is fascinating, and it's quick too. You don't have to make out 2 hours to watch it all. And I think you've got empowered, just empowered period on the front, on the very clear near to the nose. I love that theme. So y'all check that out. Also, a deeper dive is this Reuters event supply chain white paper, which was produced in partnership with Apex team, entitled Multimodal Flexibility Within Your Logistics Network, Future-Proofing. We've heard a lot about that. Future-proofing operations amidst supply chain volatility. That is also going to be one click away from you in the comments there. Sean, in that white paper, what's one thing quickly that you can pull out as in a whiff them? What's in it for me? Watch it, folks. Check it out.
Change is good. Options are better.
Okay. I'm going to write that's a t-shirtism. Change is good. Options are better. All right. Well, Sean, a pleasure to have you. Kim, before we wrap, though, I loved your last comment. That might have been your key takeaway. You're challenging folks to do business different earlier. But with Sean's t-shirtism there, change is good, options are better, or anything else we've kind of run the gambit on over the last hour, any last point you want to leave with our audience?
Pick the right partner. And that it goes above and beyond pricing. Okay. So when I talk to people about picking the right partner, price is actually the last thing we talk about. What kind of tech do they have? How do they support you? Do they have access to the capacity? Do they care about you? Are you going to be a tiny little customer or a great big customer? Where do you fit in their ranking? Their culture. How does their culture complement your corporate culture? That is way more important than people give access or give importance to. So I think the thing that I heard from Sean today is the most important thing in air cargo is making sure that you have the right partner.
Yes, well said. And I would just piggyback one little thing. Are they open to change? Because we know change is going to always be there. And it's a tough, when you try to collaborate with folks that are very resistant to change, especially in this industry, bad things can happen. But well said there, Kim. Well said, Sean. I want to thank everybody. Thanks. First off, I know we couldn't hit everybody's comment and question out here today. Again, you'll be able to connect with Sean and the team, and we encourage those post-show conversations for sure. They always bring lots of new eureka moments. I want to big thanks to one of the coolest guys around. I tell you, cool as a cucumber. Sean Francisco, Chief Operating Officer for the Americas with Apex Logistics International. Sean, thank you so much for being here.
Scott, Kim, thank you very much as well. I really enjoyed myself.
I did too. We're going to have to do it again. And Kim Reuter, as I knew, your expertise and background was a great fit for this conversation here today. Thanks for being here, Kim.
Love being here. Thank you for the opportunity.
And one more shout out. Charles Walker, I'm sorry if I missed you earlier. Supply Chain Now is next level supply information. Hooah! All right, Charles, I got you, man. Airborne always, not me, him. I was just a lowly Air Force data analyst, folks. But hey, with all of that said, What a great conversation here. Hopefully you've enjoyed it as much as I have. Make sure you reach out to Sean and the team. Check out those resources. Make sure you follow or connect with Kim also across social, especially on LinkedIn. But one thing that we got to challenge you to do, that is take action. Take one thing that Sean or Kim touched on here today, put it in action. Your teams are ready to change how business is done, but it takes deeds, not words. So with all that in mind, on behalf of the entire Supply Chain Now team, Scott Luton challenging you, do good, give forward, be the change that's needed. And we'll see you next time right back here at Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.